Scott Miller, welcome to my Top Performance blog. I have the distinct pleasure today of speaking with Crystal McMullen, who I met, I believe, for the first time on my last trip down under. We were doing the 3-day intensive on feedback-informed treatment, and there you were. And we started this conversation, and I was so surprised by what you've been doing. Crystal, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself and where you work and what you do, and then we'll kind of move slowly into what your research is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that's correct. We met down in Melbourne, and I was down there as part of my, I guess, two folds to my role. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Southern Queensland,
Hmm.
and I'm also a registered clinical psychologist. So I have a small private practice that I work at as well.
Okay.
And yes, I heard, much to my pleasure, that you were coming down to Melbourne to do the training. Although I was looking forward to, expensing a trip to Chicago to come and see you, but much more convenient to come down to Melbourne. And yeah, and so I guess it was my interest in this area that really brought me down there.
And it was so exciting to be there and be able to do the 3-day intensive and meet so many practitioners like yourself that are doing incredible work. We
Mm,
started a conversation because we have some interests that actually happen to overlap a great deal. And that interest is work on the therapeutic alliance. And
absolutely.
I've been saying for a number of years that I'm surprised by the lack of coverage work on the alliance and training on the alliance gets in postgraduate education. And you surprised me by saying, well, it's not just in postgraduate education.
Yeah.
Actually, it starts much earlier than that. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened and what gave you this idea, and then let the cat out of the bag about your research?
Absolutely. I'll save those spoilers for the end. Um, so really for me, this started during my own postgraduate training here in Queensland. And I actually for an elective subject of all subjects, got tasked with this assignment where I had to look at the difference in treatment outcomes between common factors and specific treatments.
Hmm.
And much to my shock at the time, obviously the outcome showed that common factors play a really significant role.
Right.
That was the first and only time that that actually came up during my undergraduate training,
Okay.
during an elective subject. Funnily enough, that was actually a counselling family therapy subject as well.
Hmm.
So I found that fascinating.
Hmm.
I then went on to, stay in academia and continue to work in different universities here in Queensland. And what I noticed is that in all the programs that I was lecturing in, there was no training that I could see on alliance skills.
Hmm. And so
So
what was most of it about? What was the focus on if it wasn't on
yes,
the relationship?
yeah, so certainly, I'm not sure about in the US, but here in Australia, a lot of the undergraduate training programs are really focused on your different psychological theories,
Hmm.
a lot about understanding neuropsychology, behavior change, those kind of things. So all very important things, and certainly things that, of course, we do need to know about.
Hmm.
Um, but just this really clear gap in something that we all know, or at least most of us know, is a really important area.
Hmm.
And so at the undergraduate level, I really thought, okay, I'll get into postgraduate, and that's where they'll hit us with all this really critical training.
Hmm.
And sure enough, in my own training in postgraduate psychology, we certainly got quoted the stats around how important common factors, and in particular the alliance, are. But just that was kind of where it was left.
Hmm. And so what, again,
Yeah.
in graduate school, where would you say the emphasis was placed if there wasn't really any discussion other than the mention of the statistics around the
Mm.
alliance? What did you spend your time in school learning?
Yeah, look, it certainly reflects what's happening in the research area. It was all around the specific treatment techniques.
Okay.
So, learning different treatment modalities, in particular, a focus on CBT at the school that I was at.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so really learning lots of wonderful strategies and
Of
techniques,
course.
but just this really clear oversight, in my opinion, on such a critical area.
And when we look at the data about the therapeutic relationship,
Mm.
and virtually every therapist, just like you say, says it's really important. And in fact,
Yep,
the research literature backs up that particular belief,
yep,
indicating that between 7 and 9% of the total variance is attributable to the relationship,
mm,
compared to, say, at most 1% to the
mm,
specific ingredients in any particular treatment approach.
yep,
So I guess it really does mean that something's missing in
I
our
was having
education
student after
system.
student after student come in, and one of the first things, which I think most lecturers do, is talk to students about what areas they feel they're already well versed in, what areas they already feel confident in, and what areas they feel they want to increase. And consistently, year after year after year, I was having students come in saying, yes, I know CBT, and yes, I know assessments, and I can do these things. When I would talk to them about, okay, how do you feel about the Therapeutic Alliance? They would, very diligently quote the stats to me around how important it is. And I said, and how much training do you have, confident do you feel in doing that? And I would just get blank faces.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
you decided to do a study around this. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to make sure that, like a good psychology researcher, that my anecdotal observations weren't just only that. I wanted to make sure that this wasn't just happened to be the sample of people that I was talking to. As I said, it was certainly my experience, it was my students' experience, and my colleagues, also would describe a similar experience, but I really wanted to back that up. So what we decided to do was actually to review all of the psychology training programs in Australia. So because of the scope of the project we were doing at the time, we focused that to two programs. We focused that to the Masters of Clinical Psychology programs and the Masters of Professional Psychology programs.
Across the whole country.
Across the whole country,
Okay.
yeah. So we developed a list of all of the different training programs. I worked with one of our clinical master students, Sally Krantz, on that. And what we decided to do was have a bit of a comparison group and actually use Master of Counselling programs just to see how we were comparing to the counselling master's levels. Yeah. So what we did was we looked at all of the publicly available information. So it was quite comprehensive. It took a long time.
I can imagine.
Yes, and very diligent. But we looked at everything that we could find online. So that included all program information that was online, program objectives, program outlines, program synopses. And then we actually took it down to the course level as well, so the subject level. So we looked at every single subject that these programs were offering. And what we were doing, we were scanning for any acknowledgement of the Therapeutic Alliance.
So not just teaching a course on the Alliance, but just any mention whatsoever.
Any mention whatsoever. So any mention in the course objectives, the program objectives, the synopses, certainly course names we would have been very excited to find. Literally any reference whatsoever to the Alliance. And of course we use many synonyms as well. So we had a broad scope of what we would accept.
Right.
And we classified basically, did the program mention it anywhere or did it not? Yeah. So in total, we ended up with 60 programs that we're looking at. Some programs didn't have any information available online, so we had to exclude those, unfortunately. We ended up with 60, so 30 clinical psychology and 15 each of the Master of Professional Psychology and Master of Counselling.
And?
Yes, and yes,
Fine.
drum roll. What we found was unfortunately confirmed my anecdotal observations.
Okay.
So we found that only 60% of Master of Clinical Psychology programs had any reference whatsoever. And we do have to really take that quite seriously. So when I say any reference, I mean one mention in their entire program.
What was that number again?
60%. Meaning that 40% of programs had no mention whatsoever.
Okay.
So that was of our clinical psychology programs. Unfortunately, my program, the Master of Professional Psychology programs, did even worse. Only 53% of Master of Professional Psychology programs had any reference, and even just one counted. So we let them get in easily.
Okay.
And that actually compared, this is the big drum roll, that compared to the Master of Counselling who had 100%.
Wow.
100% of Master of Counselling had either a program objective, a course objective, or a course name specifically about the Therapeutic Alliance.
Now, I know this wasn't in the scope of your particular question, but couldn't you estimate or guesstimate how many of those programs mentioned, say, the application of a specific technique for a specific disorder?
So certainly we have the data to possibly do that as a follow-up. Good idea. But yeah, look, very easily from looking through the data myself, certainly Sally looking through the data, 100% had a focus. I would say the majority had a course title specifically about CBT or a similar treatment, modality, or certainly at least a program objective and definitely a mention.
I mean, clearly one of the implications is that Masters of Counseling students are leaving far better prepared with regard to the relationship than
Yeah.
in the other two programs. But I'm
Yeah.
wondering if we think more globally and generally, what are the implications for your students? What does it actually mean for them?
Yeah, look, I think what I think it means is that they're leaving the postgraduate training in the exact same position they were in the undergraduate training, where they're walking out being told it's important, but they're not walking out with any additional knowledge or skills.
Hmm.
And to me, that's a clear implication because if we're not identifying it as an objective at either the course or program level,
Hmm.
um, then clearly students aren't walking out with any kind of additional understanding of how much of a priority this is.
This reminds me actually of some findings, very recent findings from Tim Anderson, a
Mm,
study just a few years ago, which found that the best predictor of a student's ability to connect with and relate with their clients was
mm,
not what happened during our graduate school program, but
yep.
actually how well they did prior to entering school.
Oh, wow.
So, in other words, it didn't seem to make much of an impact, really, if the focus
Mm,
isn't there.
yeah.
How could it make much of a difference? Hmm.
Yeah, I guess it does make that finding does make perfect sense in combination with ours, is that if you're coming into the program and the program doesn't have that focus, you're going to leave the same way you came in.
Now, I know your study just didn't end, though, with school. You've actually continued and extended your question. Can you say a little bit more about what
Yeah,
you've done?
absolutely. So this particular study I'm describing here is actually part of a broader study because I really am wanting to look at this from multiple angles to make sure we're triangulating the data and kind of making sure we're getting what's really happening. We certainly don't want to be criticizing postgraduate programs if in fact they are doing the right thing.
Hmm.
So obviously this data is the first step in telling us that no, maybe they're not prioritizing as much as they should be.
Hmm.
Um, and so what we wanted to do is, I guess, look at this from a different angle. So we've actually interviewed a number of psychologists as well. So another master's student who's from Charles Sturt University this time, Emily Senyon. So she actually worked with me on a project where we looked at interviewing psychologists. Now this data is certainly still in the analysis phase, so I won't talk too much to the results as yet. But really, anecdotally, what we're getting as we're sorting through this data is that psychologists are coming out saying, I certainly didn't learn about this at university.
Hmm.
I'm not sure I really ever was taught this by anyone.
Hmm.
And I've really been learning it on the ground, just kind of figuring it out myself.
Hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And I suppose the implications here are that maybe this has something to do with the high dropout rate from care. It may
Yeah.
have an impact on our ability to attract clients to our service. Here's a business that's entirely oriented towards establishing relationships with people, and we're not really getting that kind of focus or specific training in school. What,
And what worries me is that graduates maybe they come into postgraduate training, kind of having this knowledge about the importance of the relationship, and as I certainly was, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to learn the skills to actually really focus on rapport and how I'm going to develop rapport with clients. And you know what? After 2 or 3 years of being taught other things, my big concern is that maybe they lose that focus and that priority, and maybe their I guess focus does get diverted elsewhere
okay, right.
to things like the specific treatment ingredients.
Now I know this probably is jumping the gun a bit, but and some of what your recommendations might be could be
Mm.
obvious. We ought to do this.
Yep.
Have you and your colleagues given some thought about what we need to do as a field, what we need to do as educators to address this
Yeah.
dearth of information and training?
Mm. Absolutely. So I think the first step that we want to take is make sure that I guess what we've seen online is actually truly reflective of what the programs are doing.
Okay.
So our immediate next step is to actually go straight to the horse's mouth and interview the program coordinators
Hmm.
and just look, this is what we've noticed about your online training, or online information. Is that really what's happening in your program?
Right.
Because obviously maybe what's online is not reflective. I suspect it is, but
Hmm.
we just want to confirm that.
Hmm.
And then I guess ultimately our main focus or our main kind of end point is wanting to develop a training program. We really want to develop something like a course or a subject that could be included as a bare minimum.
Hmm.
Something that we're really giving students that focus as we're seeing them getting with treatment ingredients.
Mm.
They're getting, specific treatment training. We want to develop a training program and see if it's going to help. See if it is going to, we've certainly done a little bit of research around, is this something you can train?
Mm.
Is it just something that's inherent to people and they've either got it or not?
Mm.
I don't know. I think it's something that we can certainly improve.
Mm.
And there's a little bit, we've had a couple of studies there that have done little bits and pieces and shown some success.
Right.
So really, really want to build on that. And the way we're going to do that, I guess, is by interviewing people who are already out in the industry, interviewing people who maybe are showing good alliance outcomes, good, using measures such as yours, the ORS and the SRS, and really looking to see people who are already doing this well and trying to get a sense of what are they doing?
Okay.
What is it? We all know that the alliance is important, but actually, and we've got snippets of how you do, I guess, work with clients to have a good alliance. But we really want to make sure if we're going to develop a module training module on this, that we're including the right ingredients.
Perfect. And
Yeah, that's the end goal.
in your review of the literature thus far, especially for the practicing professional, somebody who's already out and who maybe privately thinks, geez, I could use some work in that particular area, but what's on offer is constantly this method or that. Have you come across anything that you think, this is something that the practicing professional might find of value?
Look, no, there's very little out there. Certainly the things we've done have been a tiny little study here with quite small sample sizes. You're talking sort of less than 10 participants in a study. And so I think that's the scariest thing of all. There is even people out there who have attended a seminar like yours, who have come away well and truly, on board with the fact that we need to be focusing on the alliance. Even if they're searching, they're not able to find it.
And is there, are you hopeful as you think about this? You see the research. Does this inspire you? Does it make you feel discouraged? And if it doesn't make you feel discouraged, well, then why not?
So, don't know if you remember, but during the conference, I told you that I'm often described by family and friends and colleagues as the eternal optimist.
I do remember. That's
so
what
I'm very hopeful. So I'm very hopeful. I feel, and I don't know if this is my eternal optimism, biasing me, but I certainly feel like there's a change. There's a change in the air. And it's going to be slow, I guess, change in psychology. We see that, it takes decades for the psychology industry to let anything go. But I feel like we're slowly starting to see, bit by bit, people coming around to this idea that, hold on, do we really need another treatment? Do we really need another way to do what we've been doing all along? And so I certainly feel hopeful. I'm certainly not going to let it go. I know you're not going to let it go. I know Daryl over in WA is not going to let it go. So I think with enough of us kind of, preaching this tune, and certainly, I don't know about your experience, but when I talk to people about it, it's never a hard sell. It's never a hard sell. Yeah. So I think people know it deep down in their gut. They've just had their focus redirected for a long time. Yeah.
Wow, Crystal, you've given us a lot to think about. I really appreciate you spending the time and figuring out all the time zones so that you and I could speak today. Thanks so very much. If people wanted to get a hold of you, chat further, ask for references to your research project, how could they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the easiest way would just be to look me up on the USQ website. So the University of Southern Queensland. So I can also, I've got my email address. I can flick that through to you. You could put that up with the video. And so the more people who want to talk to me, the better.
Thanks so much, Crystal, for your time.
Thanks, Scott.